For the latest in strategic affairs, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Click the bell icon for updates.
This is StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh. Revi. On the talking point today, in Moscow, our expert analyst is Dr. Dmitry Trenin. A warm welcome to all our viewers who are joining this on one of our last programs of 2022. As we said, our expert analyst is in Moscow. Welcoming again to StratNews Global, Dr. Dmitry Trenin. Dr. Trenin, good to see you, sir. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the invitation. Glad to be on your program.
Pleasure's all ours, Dr. Trenin. Dr. Trenin, just wanted to get your views on how Ukrainian President Zelensky's visit to the US and the clearance of the Patriot air defense system is being seen in Russia. I do know President Putin has made comments on it, though.
Well, I think that the delivery of the Patriot system to Ukraine is not expected to make any major changes on the battlefield or over the battlefield in Ukraine. The official Russian reaction to Zelensky's visit to Washington was predictably fairly skeptical and negative. The United States is expected to continue to provide aid to Ukraine and to be involved in so many ways in the conflict, which is seen in Russia as essentially a proxy war between the United States and Russia. So the Zelensky visit was important in the domestic U.S. context, where a number of Republican legislators were skeptical about the aid packages and the accountability attached to that, the aid packages directed at Ukraine.
Since you're mentioning the Republicans, Dr. Trenin, in 2022, the Biden administration and Congress have directed what, over $50 billion of aid to Ukraine. Do you expect that to change, and would you see Zelensky's visit that linked to that, with Congress passing into Republican hands in January?
Yes, I think it was important. As I said, the visit was important for domestic American political reasons, and it was important to impress on the Republican legislators who had doubts about the aid packages and the accountability of Ukraine with regard to those packages, so that these people will be impressed by the visit, by the public reception of that visit, the media hullabaloo around the visit, so that they might soften their stance. But no one seriously believes in Russia that the United States would just discontinue or even reduce the amount of money that it sends to Ukraine. I think the Republicans will insist on, as I said, more accountability. But at this point, we are witnessing a bipartisan policy toward Ukraine and Russia, which is unlikely to change in the foreseeable future.
A message to our viewers, do give us thumbs up if you like this video, do share the link and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It wasn't just President Zelensky who was making visits, Dr. Trenin. President Putin made his first visit to meet President Lukashenko in Minsk in over 3.5 years. I mean, they have met in Russia several times, though. Belarus is the fourth country in the world now to be promised the S-400s. There are military exercises that the Kremlin is conducting with Belarusian army as well. How founded are the fears of Belarus joining or at least supporting another offensive in the new year against Ukraine?
Well, I think that Russia means business when it says that the objectives of the military operation in Ukraine will be reached. We don't know when the offensive will come, from where it will come, what it will involve, what the plan is. But one thing is clear: Russia or the Russian leadership is being very serious on the issue of Ukraine. And I think the visit by President Putin, actually, the visit also involved trips to Belarus by the Russian defense minister and the Russian foreign minister. I think that it has to be viewed in that context.
Again, there were more visits as well. Former president and prime minister and the current deputy head of the National Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, was in Beijing. He met Xi Jinping and others. The naval exercises being conducted currently between Russia and China in the East China Sea. How does Russia, Dr. Trenin, view this no-limits partnership with China? It certainly doesn't like to be looked at as a junior partner.
Well, this no limits thing has to be, again, taken with a grain of salt. And China is certainly pursuing its own policy based on its own vision of the world, its own interests in the world. China is officially taking a neutral position with regard to the Ukraine war. Certainly, China is much closer to Russia than it is to the other side. But China is not providing Russia with military systems, with munitions, other things that might have helped Russia in this war. You see, the United States is marshaling military support to Ukraine from about 50 countries, and many stocks in many NATO countries are running low because weapons are being sent to Ukraine. Russia experiences a similar problem, but it has to rely on its own stocks, it has to rely on its own production, and certainly Chinese assistance would be welcome. But China, as I said, is a sovereign partner to Russia, and it certainly will only do things that make sense in the Chinese view. Now, this junior thing junior partnership thing has been played up by in the Western narrative, I think, with a very clear purpose of making Russians uncomfortable and pushing them to revise the relationship with China, which, as things stand, is particularly in the strategic area, in the military field, in many other areas. This is a partnership which does not have a senior partner. China, you may say, is a much bigger economic entity than Russia. China is technologically ahead in a lot of areas, ahead of Russia. But overall, the relationship cannot be seen as a reversal of the Sino-Soviet relationship of the 1950s. China is not giving orders. Russia is not following those orders. There is a certain balance in the relationship, which I think the Russian leadership will be very careful to maintain. So it's a close relationship, but certainly there are always limits to any relationship between two sovereign nations, and China and Russia are no exception to that.
Another reminder to our viewers, at the bottom of your screen, you see a scroll. Do join our Telegram circle. You'll get the latest updates of when we put up articles on our website, or videos like this one. Is also a QR support code or a link in the YouTube descriptor. Dr. Trenin, just shifting focus a little bit to the effects of the war in Ukraine and other geopolitical issues. Russia has emerged as India's largest oil supplier. I think it was 22% of our imports in October. How will this Western price cap affect the energy crisis in your view? And want you to also comment on Russia offering to facilitate or even build tankers for India.
Well, it's a very important question, certainly, given the importance of energy exports for the Russian budget. President Putin said some time ago that Russia will not sell oil to the countries that join the price cap on Russian oil. Just yesterday, I think, the Russian Deputy Prime Minister in charge of energy, Alexander Novak, said that Russia will not sell oil to the countries that enter the price cap in contracts with Russia. He also said that Russia might consider reducing its oil output by 5 to 7%, expecting, I think, that the rise in oil prices will compensate for that reduction. Now, it's a good thing that Russia has a very strong relationship with India and a number of other countries, and I think that India is also finding importing Russian oil at favorable prices to be beneficial for its economy. I think it's very important for the Indian economy to rely on cheap energy supplies to engineer faster growth. Now, the problem, of course, for Russia is that the tanker fleet around the world, and those who insure oil tankers, are in the Western camp and follow Western sanctions on Russia. Thus, Russia's outreach to India with regard to a tanker fleet. I think Russia is serious on building its own facilities, its own platforms for transporting not just its oil but other commodities, including grain, to other countries, so that it doesn't rely on the good graces of the West, which will not be forthcoming, never. So this outreach to India is very important. And actually, I hear at least some reports that China balked at a similar Russian offer. So it's important to see how, it's interesting and important for Russia to see how India will react to this offer from Moscow.
India has been often calling out double standards with Western or European when they want other countries to follow sanctions on energy or oil, while they themselves are buying so much. In that light, Dr. Trenin, I'm going to put it out on the screen as well. I don't think many know that even for US imports, the price cap will not be enforced till, I think you can pick it up before the 5th of February, and it can be delivered before the 1st of April next year. So I just wanted your thoughts on Western double standards.
Well, you know, there are double and triple and quadruple standards around the world. So the issue of a uniform standard is it's an ideal. It doesn't really exist in this world. Certainly not as far as the practices of Western nations are concerned. The United States, in particular, would do things that are in its own interest, first of all. And it's interesting that at the time when the United States was pressuring its European allies to reduce and cut their economic ties with Russia, America's own trade with Russia, small as it is, was booming. So the U.S. would make exemptions. The U.S. would make deferrals. The U.S. would do some other things, having in view the interests of the United States itself and the interest of U.S. corporations. Well, there's certainly a limit to that, but you know, I'm not surprised by double standards. I think this is the normal practice of certainly of Western countries. The problem with I think it's not the problem, but one core thing about the West is hypocrisy. Russia may be accused of being sometimes cynical about things, saying things bluntly, doing things out of turn, and trampling on some others, some other people's, so-called values. For the United States and Western European countries, or European countries, it's very important to always make it look that they're fully in tune with their own values. But being in tune with your values sometimes is bad for your interests. So you want to keep both somehow, and often you pretend to act in conformity with your values, but in the fine print, you make sure that your interests are not damaged as a result. I mean, that's the game. That's normal. You shouldn't be surprised by that. That's standard operating procedure.
Sure. Now, Xi Jinping reportedly told Mr. Medvedev that talks should take place between Russia and Ukraine. Prime Minister Modi has been saying the same. What conditions, Dr. Trenin, are needed for both sides to re-enter negotiations to try and end the war?
Well, I think that if we're serious about ending the war, not just stopping it for a period of time and then resuming it after a while, or having some sort of a unresolved issue that can blow into our faces at any moment, we must be serious about the issues involved. For Russia, and President Putin said it very clearly, the issue is that Ukraine was turned into, quote unquote, an anti-Russia, a pawn used by the United States to threaten Russia at close distance. Now, Russia cannot live with that situation. I think Putin made a very rare revelation that he regards now what he did in 2014, 2015 by not going the full way in Ukraine and signing the Minsk agreement with Ukraine, guaranteed by Germany and France, that stopped the war, but only for the war to continue at a lower level, and then essentially provoking Russia to complete the job that might have been completed with fairly few casualties and fairly few resources back in 2014, 2015. Putin doesn't want to enter the same river of blood, if you like, the second time. So basically for him, the issue is that Ukraine should stop being this anti-Russia, this, as some of my American colleagues called, unsinkable U.S. aircraft carrier parked at the doorstep of Moscow, of the Kremlin. The distance between the Ukrainian border and the Russian capital is just a few hundred miles. Now, Ukraine, the territories that used to belong to Ukraine and are now formally part of Russia constitutionally, should be regarded as part of Russia. And Putin also called for denazification of the Ukrainian regime, which essentially means the elimination of all those ultra-nationalist, anti-Russian elements from the Ukrainian elite, and demilitarization of Ukraine, which means a neutral status and non-bloc status for Ukraine. This is this is a tall order to which certainly the Ukrainian leadership of today and the United States would never agree. But that, I think, is something that Russia can hardly compromise on at this point. Ukraine, for its part, wants complete withdrawal of Russian forces from the Ukrainian territory, as it was back in 2014, and Russia's payment of a huge indemnity and the punishment of the Russian leadership on the model of the punishment of the Serbian leadership as a result of the Yugoslav wars. So Mr. Putin should appear in court in The Hague. Again, this is an absolutely absurd demand from Ukraine. The United States wants to, at least in the words of its defense secretary, wants to inflict a strategic defeat on Russia, essentially to render it impotent militarily. Again, these positions are impossible to somehow bring to any meaningful compromise. So that's where we are. I think that the Russian leadership wants to appear before, particularly before the audiences in the non-Western part of the world, as wishing peace, but a peace that would not be just another ceasefire, another Minsk that would require a new war a few months or a few years down the road. As far as the Western position is concerned, I think you can pass your judgment yourself.
Sure, but if you look at the motive, the deep motive, which is Ukraine moving towards the West, towards NATO, I'm not even looking at the ground position in terms of territory. Now, forget that happening. Ukraine is tilting more towards the West. The countries on Ukraine's borders, whether it's Poland and other European countries, or the Latvian and Scandinavian countries, they all are also taking a hawkish position versus Russia. So in that sense, what has Russia achieved with its operations?
Well, Russia is in the middle of an operation. And this operation, I watched President Putin speaking before the military chiefs just a couple of days ago. He looked very confident, and he looked very sure of the ultimate success. I think for Mr. Putin, this is going to be a long war. And this is a war which is existential for Russia, not just in security terms, but in many other terms. Russia is involved in this wider hybrid war against the West, which did not start on the 24th of February this year. Over 50 countries have joined the sanctions regime against Russia. And these countries are pushing the Russian economy to take a very different shape, to orientate itself toward other markets and making emphasis on domestic production of the things that the Soviet Union used to produce, such as airplanes in large passenger airplanes in large numbers, but then stopped doing it, relying solely on Russia's oil and gas proceeds. So there are fundamental changes within the country, and I think those changes will be even more important than the changes in the geopolitical strategic setup in Eastern Europe. With regard to Ukraine, part of Ukraine is not, it's about 1/5 of the territory is no longer under the control of Kiev. Russia, for example, has managed to ensure that the Crimean Peninsula is now supplied by fresh water from the Dnieper River, which was denied in 2014 by the Ukrainian authorities. Again, this was never called in the West, never called a genocide, never called, something bad, because, the people on the other side of the border are, again, double standards all the way. I mean, this is a normal thing. The northern coast of the Azov Sea is now in Russian hands. There's a land bridge from Russian territory all the way to Crimea. This is no small thing, again. The Russian army is a very different animal today from what it was in February. Lots of things have been learned. Lots of things are in the process of being changed. There's a gulf of difference between a peacetime army and a warring army. And there's a transformation going on within the Russian army. There's a transformation within Russian society. A lot of people who were collectively called the oligarchs were constrained to make a choice between their country of residence, at least formal residence, Russia, and their assets, which were often parked abroad. And some stayed within Russia. Others went to their riches, and that I think is healthy. Russia is no longer, at least it's in the process of stopping being just a cow to be milked by those people, the oligarchs, with the milk being kept or sold outside of Russia. So it's no longer this milking cow for the oligarchs. That's important. Something is changing, I hope, within the Russian elite, because new people are coming to the fore, people who are going through the war, who are going through the new territories, and who are being battle tested. It's a different thing when you put your own life at risk as part of your duty, or as an expression of your real your real wishes, your real inclinations, what you want to make of your life, whether you want to simply enjoy the riches in the West, or whether you want to do something for your own country. There's a volunteer movement within Russia, which is a novel thing. We didn't have that. So there's a different kind of civil society that's emerging, not civil society fostered by Western funded NGOs, but something that's genuinely Russian. And then Russia is opening up to the much neglected, I should say, non-Western parts of the world. Russia was too focused on the Europeans, the North Americans, and all that, and wanted to be part of that community in the world. It learned a long time ago that there's no way it could become part of that community, but it still continued by inertia to focus on that part of the world. Now its horizons are broadened. Russia is learning so much more about other countries and seeking to engage with them, not just with the old trusted and tested partners like India, but countries that are relatively new as partners, the countries in the Gulf, the Emiratis, the Saudis, the Bahrainis, and some others, and the people in Latin America, other parts of the world. So I think there's a hugely important change. I think that in the end, unless and of course you're at war, anything may happen, unless there's something that leads to Russia's defeat, which I cannot totally ignore, though I don't think it's likely. But if Russia is successful in that war, it will be a very different Russia, and in my view, a better Russia domestically, and let's say a more credible Russia on the world stage.
I mean, you're talking about not looking just to the West. The emblem of the two-headed birds looking left and right, pretty apt. But if this war continues indefinitely, Dr. Trenin, what about fears or the threat of nuclear escalation?
Well, I think this issue has many angles. One angle was that Russians were surprised, really surprised, by their nuclear deterrent not being able to prevent a U.S. intervention, if you like, or let me put it in softer terms, U.S. massive involvement in a war that touched upon Russia's premier national security interests, existential interests. And they thought that the possession of nuclear somehow guaranteed that the United States would be restrained from doing things in the areas where Russia had that overriding security interest. First of all, Ukraine. Now, this is no longer taken as, in fact, this is seen as a failure of this maybe myth of deterrence. The United States is very heavily involved, and it's incrementally upping the ante in Ukraine. And with the arrival of the Patriot systems, this is another step on the ladder. On the other hand, the fears expressed in the Western media and by Western politicians that Russia is somehow preparing to use tactical nuclear weapons in Ukraine to defeat Ukraine or to avert its own defeat are, in my view, malicious misinterpretations of Russia's intentions. I think it was back in the late 1970s and the early 1980s when then Soviet military command came to the conclusion that tactical nuclear weapons were not of much use on the battlefield in Europe. So basically, the idea of waging a major war with nuclear weapons being used as battlefield weapons was discarded. Now there's no sense today to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine to achieve any meaningful strategic result. Another thing is that for the United States, a limited nuclear war is part of the used to be part of the standard playbook of warfighting. But the reason for that was that the United States always contemplated fighting those limited nuclear wars thousands of miles away from its territory, whether in Europe or in Asia. For Russia, any use of nuclear close to its borders would be too close for comfort. So that's not something that people contemplate at this point. There was a Russian retired general who said during one of television shows, it's absurd to use nuclear weapons in Ukraine for us because it's our land where we plan to live there. Well, this is, the general talking very loosely, but that's the gist. We part of the Ukrainian territory is populated by Russian people who, unlike others in Ukraine, are more closely connected, orientated toward Russia and the Russian people. Actually, Russia today has about 5 million refugees from Ukraine, not counting the people who live on the territories that are now formally, in terms of the Russian constitution, formally Russian. So I don't think that this tactical nuclear weapons used in Ukraine is something that is serious. What is serious, though, is nuclear as a deterrent, and it did not work to prevent major involvement by the United States in the Ukraine conflict. Okay, but I'm just thinking freely. I'm not translating anyone's ideas or thoughts or anything. People are being very careful, and that's serious people. But should the strategic situation in Ukraine become very unfavorable for Russia and threaten Russia with a strategic defeat that the Russian military doctrine talks about as one of the reasons for using nuclear weapons. And we're not talking about those mythical Ukrainian victories in Kiev or in Kherson, or their real but small operational level victory in Kharkov. If there's something much, much bigger than that, I think a question may be raised with regard to supply lines that connect Ukraine to NATO, and through which Ukraine has been able to use all those to receive and use all those weapons supplied by the United States and its allies. So in extremis, this issue could come up, and well, there may be a nuclear side to the story, at least in terms of the nuclear's deterrent value, or the deterrence value. So that's how I see it.
Dr. Dmitry, Trenin, absolutely appreciate your time and your thoughts. I can only hope and wish you and everyone in the region, despite what is happening now, Snovim Godam.
Snov, God, a happy new year to you and to all of you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dr. Trenin. And thanks to all our viewers who remember that scroll at the bottom of your screen will help you join our Telegram circle. You'll get the latest updates when we put it up on our website or our YouTube channel. You can also help us financially if you would like to support us. There's a QR code that is flashing, UPI QR code that's flashing on your screens currently, and the link is also there in the YouTube descriptor. This is The Talking Point on StratNews Global. I'm Amitabh.